Hey Internet, it's Matt here for the Dork Lords. If you're new to the channel, welcome. We talk about all manner of dorkly things here, so whether it's sci-fi, fantasy, superheroes, we probably have a playlist about it. Feel free to check us out. Today is another in our Dork Lord of the Rings segments, and I was all prepared to do a video about Grond, the battering ram that takes out Minas Tirith, has a really cool backstory, and I will do that video probably next week, because in the meantime, today, some amazing Middle-earth news dropped, and so I felt compelled to do a video about it. All right, Amazon dropped some really big information about their Middle-earth series. Okay, so a couple of weeks ago, Amazon they dropped a map on Twitter. I didn't really mention it at the time because there wasn't much to talk about, but it occurred to me that this map that they had dropped, which had no place names listed on it, might start filling out. Maybe they would start, making little hints about what the show was going to be about. Sure enough, that's what's happened. So, okay, the very first map they dropped, it was obviously of Middle-earth in the Third Age, but it didn't have any place names listed. So yeah, it was just, that was it. A couple of maps kind of came by. They started filling in info, but not only that, they were changing the map. And I think based on what we've got today, and I'll show you the map here as we do the video, but I believe what they were doing is going back in time. They were showing the region of Middle-earth going back in time. Okay, I know I mentioned this a lot, but the War of the Ring happens at the end of the Third Age. Okay, the Third Age of Middle-earth. Third Age is about 3,000 years long. So right at the end of it, boom, that's Lord of the Rings. Okay, that's your 3 movies. Okay, so before that there was the Second Age, and the Second Age is about 3,000 years long as well. So, and then before that's the First Age, obviously. But so Second Age and Third Age combined is a period of time that's about 6,000 years long. So it's a lot of time. Okay, now, what we were told leading up to today, to this week, was that the show was going to focus on young Aragorn. Okay, Aragorn obviously fought in the War of the Ring. Now, he could live pretty long for a human, but he can't live thousands of years, right? So he's not like an elf might. So you would think that if it was going to be a show about young Aragorn, it's going to take place right there in the years leading up to Lord of the Rings, kind of like a prequel to Lord of the Rings. Maybe between The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, you've got Aragorn growing up in Rivendell, being raised by Elrond at Rivendell. Okay. This map that just got dropped today, got dropped along with a couple of things. It's interesting. There's a poem, the poem is mentioned in the tweet as well. So it's, one ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them, in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. Okay, so that poem is listed along with this thing. And right away, if you're looking at it, you see that just off the coast of Middle-earth is the island of Numenor. Now, Numenor, I just did a video about it, actually, the downfall of Numenor, if you want to go back and check that out. I won't belabor the point, but essentially, Numenor was destroyed by a cataclysm, kind of Atlantis style, in the Second Age. So again, thousands of years before the War of the Ring, Numenor disappeared. And so the fact that it's on this map is very telling. This is a Second Age map. Also, just in case people were unaware, there's the tweet says, "Welcome to the Second Age." Okay, so this says a lot about this series. For one thing, obviously, if it's Second Age, it does not involve Aragorn at all. But I'm reluctant to say this is not a young Aragorn story at all, because they were pretty clear to mention this. I don't think that was just a rumor. I think that was something supported by Amazon at the time. So my thought, here's how I feel like it could be still young Aragorn and also take place thousands of years earlier. I'm thinking perhaps we're seeing Aragorn, in his youth at Rivendell, with Elrond, with Arwen perhaps, and that it's a framing device. So young Aragorn is being told these important stories that are going to be very relevant to him in his adulthood by the perfect historian Elrond, because Elrond was there. He's basically talking about his day, because all these events of the Second Age he was there for. So that's what I think could be happening here. We have young Aragorn, so you have I feel like Amazon's going to want to have a character that the audience can relate to immediately from The Lord of the Rings, right? If you go thousands of years earlier, it might be tricky to have enough major characters that the audience gravitates to. In this case, you got Aragorn. Oh, well, that's young Aragorn before he fought in The Lord of the Rings. Great. Elrond is a character, obviously, that can be in the main story and in the framing device. But there are some other, basically people like Galadriel, for instance, I think would potentially be a major character in the Second Age telling of things. All right, so let's assume for a second we got a framing device where we spent a little bit of time in the Third Age, and then we're back in the Second Age. I don't think they would go to all this trouble to show us this map and focus on this so majorly if it wasn't going to be a major part of the first season, right? If it's just like, oh, we did a flashback for 5 minutes. There you go. Like, they wouldn't go to all that trouble to do this advertising campaign for a brief flashback. So I feel like the bulk of this season is going to take place in the Second Age, which just blows my mind. That didn't think that was going to happen. So that's really cool. There's a lot that happens in the Second Age. So by looking at this map, this last map that they put out, by the way, I should say this, interesting that, okay, so the map comes out with the poem, right? One ring to rule them all. Okay. Note the date that this came out. It is March 7th, 2019. 3719. 3 rings for the elven kings under the sky. 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone. 9 for mortal man doomed to die. And 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne. So I think that's the reason this came out today. 3719. Those are the numbers of rings that are passed out to the various races. Kind of cool. Actually, really cool. This map is pretty detailed. There are certain sections that don't have really any inscriptions on them, but a lot of the map is filled out. And so from that, I went to I kind of looked at the history of the Second Age, especially things involving changes to the landscape, and tried to put them onto this map to see where in the Second Age this takes place. Because again, 3,000 years, long time. So for instance, Numenor. Numenor is destroyed near the end of the Second Age. So in the year 3319, so very near the end of the Second Age, Numenor is destroyed. So we know it's before then, but that doesn't really help us much. That cuts it off by, 150 years or so. But that's, we're trying to narrow down where in the Second Age this map might be relevant. So there's that. So then there's also, I was starting to look at the place names, and I saw one. It's Ostinithil. Ostinithil is a town. It was actually the capital of Aragorn back in the Second Age. So it's an elven capital. It was founded by Galadriel and Celeborn, and it's just to the west of Moria, Khazad-dûm. And in fact, I didn't talk about necessarily the city, but I talked about Aragorn and a lot of the events that I'm about to talk about in my video, Why Do Elves and Dwarves Hate Each Other? Because what I'm about to talk about is a period of time during which elves and dwarves actually kind of got along. A brief period of time where that's where they actually end up making the door at the gate of Moria together. The dwarves crafted it, the elves inscribed on it. So there was a little bit of harmony there. Well, this capital city was part of that harmony. But Ostinithil was founded, as I say, by Galadriel in 750 of the Second Age. And it was destroyed kind of around 1700 of the Second Age. Okay, so I feel like now we've got Maybe you've got about 1,000 years in there that this is probably taking place in. Also, just to back that up, there is a forest. It is on the western coast of Middle Earth, and I'll zoom in on the stuff in the maps. But in the map that we see, it's got a lot of forest on it. Okay, well, in 1700, about the time that Sauron was losing, he was about to be defeated, one of the times he was defeated, he burned that forest to the ground. So there was no forest there after 1700. Hence, this is a pre-1700 situation. Also, I noticed this, in Mordor, there's no naming conventions at all in there. And for instance, you would think Barad-dûr, Sauron's tower would have been named if it existed. It is not named. That tower was built in 1600 of the Second Age. So again, I feel like this is happening before that even. And so what that leads me to think is, what are the events that are happening before 1600 and after 750 in the Second Age that would be very relevant, especially considering the poem they chose to put on with this, which is about the ring. This is when the rings are forged. Okay, so first, the One Ring is forged in 1600, around the same time that Barad-dûr is created. Obviously, that's where he's making the ring. So before that, though, the various rings of men and elves and such were made in about 1500. And the guy who makes those rings is Celebrimbor. Now, he's the guy that is actually the king of Eregion. He's that region. He's the one that inscribed the greeting, "Speak, friend, and enter," on the door at Moria. And he was an amazing smith, and so he crafted these items. He wanted mithril from the dwarves, and that's why they had such a great relationship. And so, yeah, 1500. Now, his story ends really tragically. He is captured by Sauron and tortured to death, stuck up on a pike, and they parade him around. It's not a good ending. Let's put it that way. Very, very tragic. But his story is very interesting, and he is a very relevant personage in that time frame. So I think perhaps the story is going to start leaning on Celebrimbor. Also, there was some hint that he was infatuated with Galadriel. She is obviously married to Celeborn, but Celebrimbor, I think, was perhaps, like a lot of people seem to be infatuated with Galadriel. I think he counted himself in those numbers. So perhaps you'd have a little bit of a, almost like a lover's triangle thing going on there, perhaps. Point being, I think what we're going to see is this time period is echoing towards a time when the rings were first forged. I could imagine young Aragorn being interested in that tale and Elrond wanting to tell him that information, thinking that perhaps this, a future king might want to know this information. And so we go back to the time when the rings were being forged, when Sauron first, really took over the land, conquered a lot of realms, fought the elves to a standstill. It was Numenor that came over to assist and helped to fight Sauron back to Mordor, but didn't quite finish the job, and so he basically rose to prominence again. What I had originally thought, if they were going to go Second Age, or if they were going to have a flashback, say, they'd be a flashback to the downfall of Numenor, right? Because that is where Aragorn's ancestors fled the island before it was destroyed, and you've got Elendil and Isildur and those guys coming over to Middle Earth, and that, if you're doing Second Age, sometime in this series, that's what we're going to see. Now, this map suggests that, because those events happen about 1,500 years after the rings are being forged. So unless you're going to have a giant time jump, I don't know that the show's going to do that. It could, but I have a feeling maybe that's more like season 2, we go to Numenor. Because what happens is, so 1700, Sauron is defeated, right? He makes the rings in 1600. He dominates for about 100 years, kills Celebrimbor, for instance, takes over several lands, then is defeated in 1700. He then gets his forces back again, and it's not until like the year 3200 or so, 3262 if you want to be exact, that he is defeated a second time by the Númenóreans, who take him prisoner and take him back to Númenor. He calls himself Anatar at this point, but he deceives the Númenóreans, basically makes them try to go to war with the Valar, and the Valar destroy Númenor's people and its island, and it's just, taken into the sea. So, but those events don't happen for another, as I say, 1500 years or so. So that seems like two different stories. My guess is season 1's going to focus then perhaps on this time of Sauron's rise to power and his eventual defeat. But in the meantime, we're going to see the death of heroes like Celebrimbor and such. And perhaps we come back to what would be, Third Age, Middle-earth, modern day, where we see young Aragorn learning these lessons that he will then use in the future. So if you've got some theories as to where the first season of Amazon's Middle-earth series might take us, please put it in the comments. Be happy to chat about it with you. This is really, really exciting. I did not see this coming. And yay to Amazon. Boy, that's really, really cool that they're taking a chance. I mean, there are going to be a lot of characters that they're going to introduce. They're going to do a lot of world building, and they're not simply just relying on Lord of the Rings to do that. So I'm really excited about where this is going to go. So yeah, awesome. Good times ahead, everybody. Thanks a lot. Subscribe if you want to get future updates. As I say, Grand will be coming up soon. And we're talking about all kinds of stuff like Umbrella Academy and Star Trek Discovery and American Gods and Captain Marvel. That's all coming up as well. So thanks a lot, everybody. Bye.